Part 73. A Sledgehammer Breaks into Pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 721. Chambord Islands, in Siachi's Rip-Off Tavern. At this time, Andrest and others were sitting here. Nami, who had not followed him out before, was chatting with the proprietress Siachi about something. Lately, the old man, seems to have gone out and is not here. Ace was sitting in front of the bar, holding a wine glass in his hand. He seemed to have drank half of the wine in it, but looking at his appearance, his face still looked a little worried. "Don't worry, my little mother won't take action. Porisalano's words alone shouldn't be able to stop Signor Rayleigh. Your trouble-making brother doesn't seem to be a big problem." Andrest took a sip of wine and said to Ace with a smile. After blocking Jun, Andrest and the others stopped chasing Luffy and the others. From Andrest's point of view, it is quite interesting to say that a group of them blocked a naval admiral. From Ace's point of view, as an elder brother, giving such help at this time can be regarded as fulfilling his friendship. After all, in the final analysis, after going to sea, he and Luffy were no longer fellow travelers. It was true that they had brotherhood, but they were members of two pirate groups. If Ace was alone, he would naturally help Luffy at all costs. But he also has partners like Andrest by his side. Being able to bring the Eternal Night Pirates to help is quite good. If he continues to get involved, the Eternal Night Pirates may also be brought into the trap. Among them, it may even cause bigger changes. These are things Ace does not want to see. However, although he understands the truth, he is still a little worried in his heart. "Yes, Ace, don't worry. What's more, your brother is the grandson of the hero Garp. Even if the Navy does catch him, there will definitely be no life-threatening danger. Don't worry, if he is here fallen here," Na opened her mouth to persuade. "That proves that he is nothing more than this, that's all," Ace suddenly said. He knew what Nami was going to say in the end. And this sentence was also very familiar to him. Because this is the mantra that Orgrim likes to say. If he falls here, it proves that he is nothing more than that, and he can't blame others. Yes, if Luffy falls here, it proves that that kid is nothing more than that, and he can't blame others. The sea is dangerous, yes, this is even more true in the New World. If you can't even pass this level, in Ace's opinion, the New World is not suitable for his brother. What reassures Ace the most is that Nami is right. Luffy, after all, he is the grandson of the old man. No matter how good the Navy is, it is impossible to kill people directly, right? Regardless of whether Luffy can't get through this pass, at least his life is not in danger. After thinking about it, Ace smiled, said, "It's me who cares about him. You're right. Although I am his eldest brother, I can't protect him for the rest of his life in the sea, let alone, after all, that kid is not from the same group as me. I want to become the Pirate King." Speaking of this, Ace recalled the figure of Orgrim in his mind. He was powerful, majestic, but full of care for him. Just after meeting him, he gave him the burning fruit. He arranged for someone to teach him, and finally, and even more, trusted him to become Andrest, his biological son's companion. Even though Orgrim had not had much contact or conversation with him from beginning to end. But Ace was able to. "I feel that I may be different in Orgrim's eyes. He also recognizes these kindnesses. I have decided to dedicate my strength to help you become king." Ace thought so in his mind. In this case, it is natural that he and the younger brother who clamored to become the Pirate King cannot be the same person. But, that's pretty good, isn't it? Compared to your brother, I am a little worried about Yamato and the others. We divided our forces to find your brother. Now it seems that we have met. What about Yamato and the others? Could it be possible that he met Porisalano?" Andrest said with some worry. Trafalgar Law suddenly said at this time, "Otherwise, let's go find him. In fact, he also has some Jun is okay, after all, he has a relationship with his hammer master. Words from Porosalino, I heard that I have often suffered losses at the hands of my own hammer master. But as soon as he finished speaking, the door of the tavern was pushed open. Then, Runty came in cursing, with Peggy Wan behind him carrying the seriously injured Yamato. What was even more interesting was that after the three of them, there were two more people following. One was Yostaskid, who had a very unhappy expression and was also cursing. The other was a very burly blue fat fish with some blood stains on his body and seemed to be injured, but with a smile on his face. Renhai Xiaojinbei. Yamato, undressed, was shocked when he saw Yamato being carried in by Peggy Wan. He stood up in a panic and walked over there. Yamato raised his head and said in a weak tone, "It's nothing. It's a serious matter, it's just that I lost strength, the injury is not serious." As soon as she said this, Undressed felt a little more relieved, but he still walked forward, helped her off Peggywan's back, and let Yamato sit on the sofa. Trafalgaro was not idle either. He quickly walked to Yamato's side, stretched out his hand to hold Yamato's arm, and a healing power was transmitted to it. After 3 or 5 breaths, Trafalgaro nodded and said, "It's really nothing serious. Don't worry." Yamato must have used some explosive force, which caused him to be a little weak and injured at the same time. It can be cured very quickly. Listening to the ship doctor's conclusion, Saint was finally relieved. "What's going on with you guys?" Undressed then asked. Nami was leaning on the bar with a touch of surprise and confusion on her face. She looked at the two slightly unfamiliar figures and said, "His Majesty Shishibukai Kaishijinbei, the second-rank supernova Eustace Kid. This is what you are doing." Runty first picked up the wine glass next to Nami, drank it all, and then said, "We had a fight with the Admiral Porosalino. He was too strong. It feels like if I hadn't run fast, I might have been beaten to death." She was chirping, but she was talking so confusingly that even Undressed and the others didn't understand what was going on. Finally, Peggy Wan spoke up and said, "Sister, let me do the talking." Runty glared at Peggy in displeasure, but she didn't cause any trouble. Instead, she looked at Kid, who had a dark face on the side, and muttered, "Why are you putting on a bad face? If we hadn't saved you, you are dead too, right?" "I won't die. If you hadn't caused trouble, I would have run away long ago," Kid retorted unhappily. "You are so weak, how can you run away?" Runty retorted unceremoniously. "Am I weak? Don't be such a stinker, I'm the one who wants to be the Pirate King," Kid yelled again. But as soon as he finished speaking, he realized that except for the one who seemed to be the proprietress, he didn't look at him. The rest of the people in the tavern were all looking at him with very strange eyes. "Oh, he's very similar to your brother. He even said he wanted to be the Pirate King," Andres smiled and said. Ace rubbed his head with a headache, and said, like an old-timer, "The newcomers are getting more and more arrogant recently. It's all because Master Chui has such a good temper." Kid frowned and was about to say something when he saw Runty standing aside with a dark face. "What are you doing?" Kid asked in a panic. But the one who responded to him was Runty's headbutt. He hit Kid's head with his head and almost killed Kid on the spot. Runty said very irritably, "Kid, don't be too arrogant, it's not you who wants to become the Pirate King, it's my Lord Hammer." Undressed and others felt a little numb when they saw this scene. "I am the captain after all, right? Why do you all think that only my dad can be the Pirate King? Where am I missing?" Undressed muttered. "Ha ha ha ha, Andre, you are still far away," Nami said with a smile while holding a glass of orange juice in her hand, biting the straw. Ignoring Nami's teasing, Undressed said to Ace beside him, "Look, luckily it wasn't Runty and the others who saw it first. Your brother, otherwise as soon as your brother opens his mouth, I'm afraid Runty will kill him without even waiting for the Navy to take action. In the entire Eternal Night Pirates, there are many people who are close to Orgrim. Among other things, Andrest is Orgrim's biological son. But Runti was the only one who really didn't want anyone to speak ill of Orgrim. Even if Andrest complained about his father, Runti would probably bump into him. At the same time, in Runti's heart, even though Andrest is Lord Hammer's biological son and her captain, she only thinks that only Lord Hammer can become the Pirate King. She didn't even recognize Roger. Kid was a little confused by Runti's angry headbutt. At this time, he was lying on the floor in a daze, unable to get up for a long time. But no one paid attention to him. Only then did Peggy Wan speak about their previous encounters. After a long time, Peggy said if it weren't for Boss Jinbei's help, we might really be lost there. Ha 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 ha, you're welcome. Master Chui and I already have a friendship. We've already arrived at the door of our house. We met, how could we not help? What's more, I can't beat Porosalino, but I need Rayleigh Senpai to take action. Jinbei laughed loudly. It was a coincidence that Jinbei originally came to the Shampoo Islands to buy some things. It turned out to be a good thing, and this happened just in time. Originally, as the king of the Shichibukai, he should have the same position as the navy. However, Jinbei, the king of the Shichibukai, did not have any special intention. It was just to promote the relationship between Fishman Island and the world government. Therefore, for these he didn't bother to care about all the messy things. He didn't care what the navy liked, and these, dead, pirates didn't care either. But, he discovered that the Admiral Russolino was fighting against seemed to be someone from Avalon. This time, he can't ignore it. Where is Avalon? The second home of Fishman Island. The Warhammer pirates have a close relationship with Fishman Island, and have taken care of their fishmen for so many years. The fishmen now have a good reputation on the sea and have eliminated so many racial barriers. Most of the credit must be attributed to Avalon. If Jinbei is pretending not to see it, what else is he going to do as a sea hero? Are you worthy of the kindness and righteousness in your heart? Therefore, he took action decisively, and put aside the position of King Shichibukai and took action against Porosalino. However, although Jinbei is strong, he is invincible in the sea. On the island, he really can't beat Porosalino Shin. Fortunately, after Jinbei delayed for a while, Rayleigh arrived. Then Jinbei protected Yamato, Runti, and others and returned here. I have long heard my father say that he has always had a regret, that is, he could not let you, Jinbei, join the Warhammer pirates. Andrest laughed and praised Jinbei. After chatting for a while, Andrest asked with some embarrassment, so, Boss Jinbei, you helped us this time, will it affect your identity and position? Jinbei waved his hand, grandly. Said it's not a big deal. The King Shichibukai doesn't really wear the same pants as the navy. What's more, my position is quite special. Regarding this kind of thing, the world government and the navy can't do anything about me. Feeler reminds you, 3 things about reading: collect, recommend, and share. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 722. The incident in the Chambord Islands required the dispatch of a general, and even an extra general was dispatched. But in fact, for the Navy, it is really a trivial matter. If it weren't for the rules, who would be willing to care about the life and death of those Tianlong people? They're just a bunch of supernovas. To put it bluntly, they would have gathered on the Chambord Islands so desperately, if there wasn't something wrong with the situation. Porosalino kicked them one by one, probably all of them would be killed. So from the Navy's point of view, regardless of the rules and looking at strength alone, this is considered a thing? Anyway, after Jun and Porosalino went to the Shampoo Islands, on the Navy side, in addition to Marshal Sengoku and Garp, they also paid attention and looked forward to the situation there. Both Kyuzan and Sakaski no longer paid attention to that side. Kyuzan was drinking tea with Smoker at this time, discussing some things about the Navy. It was nothing unexpected. Sakaski was sitting alone in his mansion at this time. There was a person in front of him. Potted plant, holding small scissors in hand, repairing something. But it can be seen that his mind is not entirely on this matter. And there is a telephone bug next to the potted plant, as if he is waiting for some signal. Maybe he was absent-minded, or maybe he made some mistakes. Just hear a soft click. The small scissors in Sakaski's hand cut the potted plant a little crookedly. A piece of the originally square and straight potted plant was missing. This piece looks so dazzling, and it feels out of place with the entire courtyard, the entire house, and Sakaski. In the past, if Sakaski had cut the wrong branch, he would have immediately destroyed the potted plant, or even burned it into slag. But today, Sakaski slowly put down the scissors in his hand. He stared at the potted plant with some thoughts in his heart. It was on a whim. At that moment, he felt something was wrong. It seems that I have fallen into some conspiracy, and there is no evidence, so I feel this way for no reason. Although Sakaski looks strong, in fact, he is not a reckless man. If he was a reckless man, how could he sit in the position of marshal? On the contrary, Sakaski is a thoughtful person. After feeling that something was wrong, he began to sort out his plan and the Navy's general plan. I want to see if there is anything I have missed here. Among them, he also focused on Jun, the main opponent. But after thinking about it, I still didn't feel anything was wrong. The Navy's strategy is indeed to attack the Whitebeard pirates first. After all, the Whitebeard pirates are at the forefront of the New World, and there is no reason to bypass them. My plan is indeed in line with this trend. But what exactly went wrong? Orgrim, Sakaski frowned slightly and said. He was talking to himself and began to recall what Orgrim had done. Well, I feel like this guy is not doing much. Suddenly, Sakaski seemed to have thought of something. Different style. Yes, the style is different. That bastard Orgrim should be someone who strives to be the first in everything. Now their Navy's war plan has come to an end. Why is there still no movement in Orgrim? Previously, I felt that this should be due to Marshal Sengoku outwitting Orgrim's arrangements. The Warhammer pirates did not notice the changes and plans on the Navy's side. There is really nothing wrong with thinking this way. After all, the Navy is making very steady progress. Not to mention Orgrim, Sakaski didn't know anything about it not long ago. Even a naval admiral like him is like this, so it's not impossible that Orgrim was deceived. On the contrary, the possibility is very high. But for some reason, Sakaski was a little less confident at this time. Hosgarot Orgrim, the character he created a few years ago, is a reckless man. The key is that everyone still believes in his evil deeds. Later, it turned out that all those who really regarded him as a reckless man would eventually become 250. The same was true for the Navy at the beginning, and they were tricked to death by this bastard. But then, no one in the sea regards Ogre as a simple reckless man. After all, if he is just reckless. With his current status, what do those heroes who have lost to him count? A sand sculpture? Sakas has also lost to Orgrim, so he will naturally not think that he is a fool, nor will he think that Orgrim is a reckless man. That guy always makes decisions before taking action. If he doesn't take action, it's fine. Once he does, the outcome is often decided. This time, his performance was too rubbish. In the current situation, from a naval perspective, Orgrim's performance was substandard. Didn't you find anything wrong with the Navy at all? Maybe that guy has become too arrogant, Sakaski thought for a while and muttered to himself. If it was because he became the strongest and defeated the Whitebeard pirates, Orgrim became a little drifting. This reason seems somewhat reasonable. But, is Orgrim really such a person? Thinking about the things he did without moral integrity, he should bow his head and run away. Doesn't he look like a person who would make such problems and mistakes? Here at the headquarters, the confidentiality level has been raised to such an extent, but there is no movement from Orgrim. It seems like it should be done, but in fact, this is the biggest shouldn't be done. That guy is not someone who would make such a mistake. Even if he did, there would still be Beckman. Can't two brothers become stupid at the same time? Sakaski thought in his heart. This idea did not make sense, and Sakaski was not a fool, so he had to think like this. He began to recall Orgrim's previous routines and personality habits. Finally, it seems that he has caught something. Orgrim has always liked to take advantage of the situation and prefers nesting dolls. Just when others thought he had reached the second level, in fact Orgrim had already reached the third level. Therefore, Sakaski began to think about the Navy headquarters plan from a new perspective. After a long time, he finally got the point. What is the most important point in the series of plans of the Navy? It's all about surprise and speed. Launch a war unexpectedly, use the fastest speed to kill the Whitebeard pirates, and catch the New World pirates by surprise. What is the advantage of this? Once the Navy takes action, it is very likely that the rest of the pirate groups, including the Whitebeard pirates, will not be ready for war and will not be able to mobilize their full strength to deal with the all-out Navy. By the time they came to their senses, the Navy had already captured the Whitebeard pirates. This is the first link in the Navy's layout for the New World War. So far, the progress is going very smoothly. We just need to wait for Marineford to land in the New World, and then we can get to the point. But, Sakaski thought of a more terrifying direction. What if these Orgrim have already been accounted for? On the surface, the Warhammer pirates are not ready for war, but what if Orgrim is already ready? As soon as the Navy enters the New World and starts a war with Whitebeard, the Warhammer pirates will be able to counter-attack as soon as possible. As a result, wouldn't the Navy's plan be immediately shattered? At the same time, Orgrim also seized the opportunity. What opportunity? Of course it's an opportunity to coerce the Whitebeard pirates to join the war, or even coerce the New World pirates to join the war. Thinking of this, Sakaski felt a little panicked. But soon, as a general, he suppressed these thoughts. This is just a guess that I have no reason for. It may be the case, but Orgrim can only count on us to start the war in advance. He should want to use the Whitebeard pirates as the vanguard to severely damage us. It's just arrogance, interrupting our plan to enter the New World. This should indeed be Grimm's fundamental purpose, but he must not have imagined that Marineford would parachute into the New World. Sakaski thought so in his heart. This is really not that he is comforting himself, but that he thinks this idea is the most reasonable. In fact, this is indeed the case. Sakaski felt as if he had seen through something, but thinking about it, it was of no use. Because the Navy was already on the verge of firing. All the preliminary preparations have been done. It is impossible for the Navy to overturn all the previous preparations just because of some of its own ideas that have no actual evidence, right? That's really stupid. The Navy now at least still has the advantage of seizing the first move. If the plan is overturned, I don't know how long it will take for the new plan to take shape. By then, Orgrim may be the first to attack. That's what's really bad. Saka thinking of this, G decided to confess his plan to the marshal boss later. Sakaski has always been able to distinguish between private interests and the public interests of the Navy. Previously, he thought that as long as he made a surprise attack and captured Teach, and then arranged a tight schedule, he would not give Newgate the chance to gather all his strength and force him to risk the rescue. In this way, the Navy can almost take down the Whitebeard pirates if they use some force. But now, Sakaski feels that if we look at Orgrim's thinking, this war should not be tested from the beginning. It must be like a tiger fighting a rabbit. All your strength must be staked. Previously, Sakaski felt that as long as he had 3 generals, some lieutenant generals and elite Navy officers, it would be enough. Now, he felt like Jun, Fujitora, and even Mr. Zifa were going to be arrested. Let's all come together, no one should hold back. We also need to involve some reliable King Shichibukai, red-haired, he is just right. Whether it is Crocodile or Orgrim, they all have irresolvable grudges with him, Kasky thought so again. Sakazuki didn't think about whether there was anything wrong with his plan to capture Teach. Therefore, no matter how you look at it, there is no problem with this plan. Unless there is a traitor among them. But Sakazuki thought for a moment, how could this be possible? Our hawkish navy is so tough, how could there be a traitor? Thinking about it, Orgrim should think that we have other means to deal with the Whitebeard pirates, or maybe he is preparing to secretly sell us some flaws in the Whitebeard pirates. Thinking of this, Sakazuki felt a little more relieved. At least the situation was not so terrible. As long as they are more serious here, they can still fight. In the final analysis, at the end of the war, it still depends on strength, Sasuke said solemnly. Still talking to himself. But as soon as he finished speaking, the phone next to him started ringing. Without any pause, Sakazuki directly answered the phone and asked, "How's the situation?" On the other side of the phone, Lieutenant General Ghost Spider said with some uncontrollable excitement, "General, the plan was a complete success. That black-bearded Marshal D was caught by us." A flash of light flashed in Sakazuki's eyes, as if he felt that the future of the Navy was waving to him. Good. Secretly escort him to the headquarters as soon as possible, and ask Fergo to act according to the second phase of the plan, spread false news that the guy named Teach is still active in the New World Portal Sea, and confuse the Whitebeard pirates, Sakazuki said in a deep voice. Yes, General, the Ghost Spider responded quickly. Falu reminds you, 3 things about reading: collect, recommend, and share. Support Filu Novel Network, b.faloo.com. Original works, all the you are listening to novels at Bless Up channel wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 723. Lieutenant General Ghost Spider went to report the battle situation to Sakazuki. Fergo naturally chose an opportunity to report the situation to his young master. Only Teach was in a worse situation. He was being guarded by Doberman and Dalmatian, with sea tower stone shackles on his hands. At this time, Teach was sitting cross-legged on the deck of the warship, looking like he was risking his life, and he was ironclad. I'm not a person with any abilities. Are you so blind? Give me some sea tower stone shackles, take them off, Teach cursed and yelled. However, Dalmatian and Doberman ignored his meaning at all. Maybe Teach was a little naughty, or maybe he felt emboldened. After all, he is the core of this plan. You know, many, for example, he knew that among the people who besieged him just now, Fergo was a staunch and hawkish Navy traitor. Or it would be more appropriate to say that he was an undercover agent. For example, he knew very well that it was impossible for these Navy to kill him. The Navy will use itself to deal with Dad. Therefore, Teach has no guilty conscience at all. At least he will never die until he sees his dad come to save him. Today I accidentally got caught by you bastards in the Navy. It was because of my poor academic skills. Don't talk nonsense to me, let alone want me to betray the Whitebeard pirates and betray my father. If you want to kill me, you to put it bluntly, whenever I frown, I am not a man, Tiki said arrogantly. Doberman and Dalmatian frowned slightly after hearing this. But indeed, they had no plans, let alone killed Tiki here. Tiki was also observing and discovered after the situation of these two people was no different from what I guessed. I was even more convinced. Mr. Chui is still reliable in doing things, but it is really not good. After we are done, let's take a look at the situation on the sea and give it up. That's right, Tiki. Now he is a little worried. He found that no matter what, he seemed to be unable to keep up with Orgrim. If he could really get the dark fruit and the shock fruit, he might be able to compete with Orgrim in terms of strength. But this is a fantasy after all. Whether he can reach the end of his power and stand on the other side is still nonsense. It is all his own imagination. At first, it was a little swollen, but the more he thought about it, the more he felt something was wrong. Even though my father had awakened the Zhen fruit, he still couldn't stand at the end of his power. Even if he gets the ability, he won't be able to awaken it in a short time. Can he really resist Orgrim's power with just the cooperation of the dark fruit? The more I think about it, the more guilty I feel. After thinking about Orgrim's subtle methods, he figured out that his father, Whitebeard, was involved in the scheme, and he also made clear arrangements for Admiral Sakaski. Even the Navy headquarters was played by him. This kind of strength, scheming, and means, Teach always feels that he is not worthy of being Orgrim's opponent. Therefore, he now has a vague idea in his mind. If after the war, Orgrim loses, then of course don't blame Teach for being rude. He will really have to have a good time in this sea. But if Orgrim wins, Tikai felt that he should stop wandering. While he was still in love, he honestly surrendered to Mr. Chui and just followed him from now on. I have to say, Teach is extremely bold. But at the same time, he especially admires the strong. He used to admire Whitebeard, but now, even if he doesn't admit it, he does admire Orgrim in his heart. In the original story, it was because he tricked the strongest Whitebeard to death, so his mentality was very inflated, and he naturally dared to stand out and become the four emperors. But now, Orgrim has him under control, and Teach doesn't dare to stab him at all, so he also has some guilt and new ideas. This is normal. At the same time, Teach also knew that after a person like him had his character and character clearly seen, few people would dare to use him to do things. After all, from an objective perspective, he is indeed a poisonous snake that may bite back at any time. But he still had confidence in joining Orgrim, and he didn't feel that he had no hope because of this view. Because in his opinion, only the weak would care about these messy things. A strong person doesn't care whether his subordinate is a lion or a poisonous snake. He secretly admired Orgrim in his heart, and naturally believed that Orgrim was the best in the world. With Ogre's strength, would he be afraid of Tiki's backlash? Nope. So as long as you are willing to join in, you should take the opportunity to work under Mr. Chui. Of course, Tiki thinks that if there is a chance in the future, it is not impossible to try to bite Lord Hammer. What if I could inherit the Warhammer pirates? But this was just a few random thoughts he used to comfort himself. After all, he knew very well that Mr. Chui was different from his father. Their physiques were there. If they couldn't be beaten, would they have to endure it? There is not much difference in age between myself and Mr. Chui. If he endures for a long time, judging from his physical fitness, if he endures to death, Mr. Chui will probably still be able to live well. So forget it. Tiki, who had made two plans in his mind, is not panicking at all now. He won't die for the time being anyway, and his survival rate in the future should be quite high. Then just waste it? Therefore, seeing that neither Doberman nor Dalmatian paid attention to what he meant, he became even more enthusiastic. Kill me. Kill me now. Do you think I will bow down to you bastard Marines? There's nothing wrong with me, but my bones are strong. If you dare, kill me now. Come, Tiki shouted. In fact, Tiki was still a little aggrieved. In his opinion, if it weren't for cooperating with this plan, just a few vice admirals, how can you win over me? But it is impossible for Doberman and Dalmatian to understand Teach's current inflated mentality. On the contrary, he felt a little emotional. Whitebeard really knew how to teach his son. I also feel that this Marshal D. Teach is truly worthy of being Whitebeard's chosen successor. Not to mention anything else, just this integrity is resounding. As vice admirals of the Navy, they don't know how many pirates they have caught. Some of them are really hard-boiled, but most of them, after being caught, will cry and beg for mercy, howl and so on. People like Teach are looking for death. It seems there really aren't many. However, they couldn't say anything openly, they could only sigh secretly. The Whitebeard pirates are really strong and strong. Of course, if they knew what this guy Teach had done, they would probably vomit in disgust. Ironclad. Non-existent. When I, Tiki, licked Lord Hammer in Avalon, I was so strong. Just when Teach was shouting and provoking the Navy here. Lieutenant General Ghost Spider came out of the cabin, looked around, and asked, "Where is Fergo?" Here, Vale also walked over from the deck on the other side at this time. Ghost Spider didn't doubt Fergo. After all, Teach had been captured, so what else could he doubt? And from the beginning, no one doubted Fergo. "Well, everyone is here, then I will convey what the general just said. Virgo, you continue to be in charge of G-3. Prepare for the war. The three of us will escort Teach back to Marineford." Ghost Spider spoke. Virgo didn't object to anything. In this plan, his tasks have been successfully completed. First, persuade Sakaski to take action, and secondly, capture Teach and send him to the headquarters. That's it. The next step is to carry out Admiral Sakaski's naval mission and spread false news that Teach is still active in the nearby waters. This is very simple, the Navy is professional in this regard. So there was no delay. Soon, Fergo's warship returned to G-3, and Teach was escorted to leave the New World. Along the way, the tough-minded Tiki continued to build a character for himself, clamoring to kill himself and so on. On the contrary, Ghost Spider and other lieutenant generals were filled with emotion. Sometimes I feel that if Teach had not joined the pirates and joined their navy, he would definitely be a hero of the Hawks. With this courage and disregard for life and death, he should become their ironclad Hawk Navy. Meanwhile, in Avalon. At this time, Orgrim had already returned from Melview. He was sitting on the sofa in his room, reading a letter in his hand, and Monet was holding a phone next to him. On the sofa next to him, Plank sat. Not far away, Robin, Her Majesty the Queen and Hancock were busy with their affairs. The letter in Orgrim's hand came from Kaido's in-laws. It didn't say anything. It first expressed its longing for Orgrim, and then said that once the war starts, Wano country will act according to the plan, but Kaido must go to the front line to join in the fun. The so-called plan is the original charter negotiated between Orgrim and Kaido. It is right to fight the navy, but you cannot ignore your head and tail. Well, this one must be the Warhammer pirates. After all, Orgrim wants to be the talker. But, let's leave it to the Beast's pirates to make arrangements. We don't have to do anything else, just stabilize the rear of the New World when the war begins. Lest anyone jump out and cause trouble. Kaido didn't have any other opinions on these. 690 said that he wanted to meet with the Navy bosses like Sengoku for a while. After Orgrim read the letter, he smiled and shook his head, not rejecting anything. He felt that he couldn't refuse. After all, Kaido was not his subordinate. What's more, the guy's temperament was there. It was unlikely that he would be allowed to join in the fun. In short, don't mess with me, Alabasta, or it will be difficult for any of us. There was a gloomy voice from the phone. There was no doubt that it was Crocodile. Orgrim smiled disdainfully and said, "Crocodile, are you teaching me how to do things?" As soon as Orgrim said these arrogant words, Crocodile fell silent. He has been miserable recently. Everything was on the right track. Alabasta has also begun to develop, and Crocodile has also begun to develop. I'm holding my breath. It depends on whether Orgrim will overturn this time. The result is good, it starts to rain monsters from the sky, and powerful monsters land in Alabasta every 3 days. Damn Crocodile was miserable. The monsters were indeed not very powerful. They were powerful, but they could not threaten masters like them at all. But you couldn't handle the constant flow of these things. The whole of Alabasta was in a mess. And Alabasta is Crocodile's most important base camp. Can he not be upset? After a long investigation, he finally figured out that it was the bastard Orgrim who was torturing him. So Crocodile called the phone bug. "What do you want to do?" Crocodile finally had no choice but to ask the sentence aggrievedly. "Although I rejected your proposal, I still supported you with 200 billion belly. As a result, you, the guy, accepted the money and refused to accept it. I have told you long ago that in the new world, you must be obedient. Crocodile, this time I will teach you a lesson. Wait for my news in Alabasta, read more newspapers, and wait until I ask you to come out and stand when the time comes. Stand up for me, understand?" Orgrim said in a very unruly tone. There was a period of heavy breathing from the phone, but in the end, Crocodile said in a deep voice, "I understand." Orgrim smiled silently and did not reply. He waved his hand to Monet. Monet was also very eye-catching and hung up the phone directly. Fila reminds you, 3 things about reading, collection and recommendation, share. Support the original works of Philo Novel Network, b.faloo.com, and enjoy all. A Sledgehammer Breaks into Pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 724. After hanging up the phone, Monet asked with a smile, "Master Hammer, do you need to tell the Admiral and Indigo to stop the beast disaster in Alabasta?" Orgrim picked up the teacup and took a sip, then asked in surprise, "Stop? Why did you stop?" Monet was also stunned for a moment, and then asked, "Didn't you promise Crocodile just now, Mr. Hammer?" "What did I promise him?" Orgrim asked back. Monet thought about it carefully, and it seemed that he really didn't answer anything. Gangplank on the side also laughed. Seeing this, Orgrim also he didn't continue to tease Monet, and said with a smile, "It's impossible to stop. Crocodile feels that he has become brave and can quarrel with me. Of course I have to show him some color, but I found that this people on the sea really think I have a good temper. After all, Master Chewie, you haven't caused any trouble when you went out for a long time." Gangplank said with a smile. In the past, Orgrim was really evil. Even if he was not the strongest at that time, no one would dare to provoke him. Therefore, at that time, Orgrim's performance outside, he just has a bad temper. If he catches the Navy, he can trick anyone into death. Since his debut, he has dared to mess with anyone. He dares to torment Roger, the Pirate King's execution ground. Impelton, who is known as an iron wall, can do anything he wants. Rob O'Hara, well, even though it wasn't him. But he bears the blame. In short, in the eyes of outsiders, O'Hara just scolded Orgrim in the newspaper, and Orgrim spread the ashes. Who dares to provoke such a ruthless man when he has nothing to do? That is to say, in the past 10 years or so, Orgrim has been living in seclusion and not doing much trouble in Avalon. So people outside feel that Orgrim's temper has improved. In the past, give Crocodile some courage and see if he dares to use 200 billion belly to amuse his Orgrim. Of course, Monet, who often goes out to play golf with Orgrim, knows this very well. Mr. Chewie rarely gets angry over small things now, maybe because of his status here. But his temper is really not a good one. He is still the murderous devil. Ha 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 ha, this is good. I, Orgrim, am also a person who wants to cultivate his moral character. Orgrim laughed a lot, and didn't seem to be angry about anything. After laughing, Orgrim said to Monet, "Tell Indigo that you can't stop, but the number and frequency are fine. Reduce it a bit and show off that guy Crocodile's temper." "Yes, Mr. Hammer," Monet responded quickly. After taking care of this small matter, Orgrim asked again, "What happened to you coming to me in broad daylight?" Do we have daylight in Avalon? Planck complained first, and then said two pieces of information. Explain. Orgrim was a little more serious this time and took a sip of tea. First, there was trouble on the Chambord Islands. His Highness seemed to have a fight with the Admiral. Anyway, there was a kid named Straw Hat who killed the celestial dragons in the Chambord Islands. It caused great harm to all the supernovae in the same period, Glank said. Orgrim. He didn't pay much attention to Luffy. The last time I heard about it, it seemed that my hawk was going to do something. Now, my hawk is heading to Avalon. When he returned, he didn't know if he had found the good idea mentioned by Enel. Anyway, Orgrim hadn't heard of Luffy for a long time. He didn't even pay much attention to Andrest. Not to mention the other supernovae. The result was good. This kid was able to kill the Draconians in the Shampoo Islands. Orgrim didn't believe that this would be the same as the original story. What kind of mermaid auction was it caused? After all, the largest auction house in the Chambord Islands is run by the Don Quixote family. And there has been no human trafficking business in the Chambord Islands for many years. Not only the fishmen and merfolk, there are even very few humans left. Really, that old white-faced guy is so unemployed that he can no longer sell himself to a rich woman to cheat money. This is partly because Jinbei is very confident, with Fishman Island and Ah standing behind him. Wallen, the Shichibukai, is not as good as before. On the one hand, the 5 old stars are also very helpful to Orgrim, and they have eliminated this kind of business several times. It is still possible to buy slaves, but in Siang Island, you can't do this kind of business. So it's definitely not possible that the Straw Hat Boy had a conflict with the Draco because of this kind of thing. Orgrim originally wanted to ask what was going on. But he kept talking. He lost interest again. What happened to that kid Luffy actually had little to do with him. And from beginning to end, this guy never provoked him. Although Orgrim looked down on this guy, he is a little kid who thinks about becoming the Pirate King every day, and does everything by relying on his crazy brain. He almost killed all his friends several times. But there is no hatred at all. On the contrary, there is still a feeling in his heart. There is a bit of a preference in the past. It can only be said that he is older and has experienced more things, and he no longer likes such hot-blooded guys. On the contrary, he prefers Trafalgar Law, who is methodical in doing things. A reasonable person. Therefore, in the end, Orgrim did not ask this boy why he wanted to kill the Draco. Gangplank did not think much and said with a smile, "But Lord Hammer, don't worry, your highness and the others are fine. On the navy side, Porisalino and Jun are dispatched, miss." In the end, it didn't really cause any big trouble. The navy probably just wanted to give the Tianlong people some face. Orgrim nodded first. After all, in the original story, things probably developed like this. But soon, he frowned again and asked, "Have you gone to the Kabukai?" Planck was stunned for a moment and said in surprise, "You can guess this." Orgrim breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Gee ha 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 ha, who do you think I am? That Bartholomew." Jimmy Puck and Orgrim spoke together. Then, both of them were stunned and looked at each other strangely. "Not Bartholomew Bear?" Orgrim asked. "There are rumors, but in the end we thought it should be some new research product of the Navy, and it is definitely not the arrival of Bartholomew Bear." "Kaiksia Jinbei comes to help," Glank said softly. Orgrim touched his chin and closed his eyes slightly, as if he was thinking about something. Gangplank didn't speak when he saw this. He knew that Lord Hammer might have thought of something important. Things. Sometimes, the careless Mr. Hammer has a brain that is even more powerful than that of Mr. Orgrim. Orgrim did feel that something was wrong. The Navy's reaction was not right. As for any new product, Orgrim no need to think too much, it must be a PX pacifist. He didn't care about anything. What he cared about was that something was wrong with Marineford. Previously, Marineford had entered a state of complete secrecy, and Orgrim naturally discovered it. But he felt that this might be the appearance given by the Navy. After all, this matter was done too crudely, maybe it was a deception, and it was gradually improved or something. But, after all, it was a little rough, and there was no reason for someone as smart as Warring States to do. You think that this kind of action can deceive yourself? Spend 00. But now think about it, maybe the Navy really has some big plan? It may even be implemented soon? Warring States seems to be deceiving himself, but in fact it is real. Marineford, is it really in a state of combat readiness? How will they fight? Are they planning to relocate the naval headquarters after the war? This time the naval admiral took action in the Chambord Islands. At first, Orgrim didn't think much about it. It seems to be similar to the feeling in the story. For Garp's sake, or because of Porisalino's bastard character, no one wants to offend him, so with Bartholomew Bear as a step, he said, just got off. But now, there is no Bartholomew Bear coming out. Jinbei, maybe so. But something is still wrong. It seems that the Navy, from top to bottom, intends to ignore this matter. What does this mean? First, Garp's face had an effect. But this is the least likely, because neither Garp nor Sengoku is a person who will disregard justice at critical moments. The second is that the top level of the world government has a change in the direction of the celestial dragons. But this change is not the main reason that affects Sengoku's decision-making. He is not a fool. This kind of thing has nothing to do with him. If he randomly expresses his position, it will be detrimental to the Navy. It can only be said that it has some effects, but it is unlikely to affect the decision-making of the Warring States period. Because the Tianlong people are falling out of favor, the Navy dares to neglect them? This doesn't make sense even if you think about it, right? Then there is only the last possibility. The Navy is brewing some big news. It is afraid that something will happen at this time and cause a chain reaction. Therefore, they deliberately made the Chambord Islands small and trivial. Thinking of this, Orgrim opened his eyes. He was more willing to predict the worst situation. That guy from the Warring States period is really courageous. What is this? Burn one's boats? Unexpected. Orgrim murmured softly. He still didn't expect that the Sengoku would parachute into Marineford to the New World. He just felt that the Sengoku might have to use a trick of surprise, just before everyone thought that the Navy would not be able to complete the new headquarters. When the war begins, he then went to war. Although this is not in line with Sengoku's character and way of seeking steady victory. But Zhuge-Liang, who has always sought stability in his life, can still devise an empty city strategy. Who knows whether the Warring States period will break out, play a style change with him. What's wrong? Planck asked, still a little confused. The Navy may be going to war with us, just recently, Ogham said solemnly. Gangplank was stunned for a moment, but before he could speak, Orgrim asked how is the matter with Teach and Fergo going? If you want to seize the opportunity, you have to look at this matter. When Planck saw this, he didn't ask any questions, and quickly said the second thing I want to say is this. News came from Doflamingo, saying that Fergo has been arrested as planned. Stay at Teach. Teach has been escorted to Marineford. Orgrim grinned, nodded, and said very good, no matter how the Warring States period is fought, let's not mess up. Let's see who completes the final route first. Although he didn't know what Orgrim was thinking, Gangplank nodded and said, yes, Lord Hammer. Ask Morgans to come to Avalon to meet me, wait 2 more days, and then remind me to contact Whitebeard. Orm thought for a moment and then ordered. Planck did not answer the question. Monet quickly recorded the itinerary on his notepad, and then said okay, Mr. Hammer, I will contact Morgans right away. The situation changed so quickly that it was somewhat beyond Orgrim's expectation. Originally both parties thought that the other party was not in a hurry, but now they realize that the other party seems to be quite anxious. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 725. Naval Headquarters Marineford. In the office of the Warring States Marshal, Sakaski was standing in front of the Marshal's desk. The two sides had obviously communicated something, and Sakaski's expression remained unchanged, his resolute dead face, and his face did not move at all. But the Warring States Marshal was very surprised. He stretched out his hand to support the glasses frame on the bridge of his nose, and touched the goatee on his chin unnaturally. Finally, he took a sip of tea and said, "What did you just say? You captured the captain of the 2nd Division of the Whitebeard Pirates?" Sakaski nodded calmly and said, "Yes, it was Fergo and his men who did it. Ghost Spider, Dalmatian, and Doberman have already escorted Teach and are returning to Marineford. Calculate the distance, it will arrive in a few days." The Warring States Marshal's expression changed a few times, and finally he said helplessly, "Are you being too bold? It is natural for the Navy to catch pirates. I just happened to meet the opportunity. What's more, Marshal, don't you just need a chance to take action against the Whitebeard pirates? Using Tiki as bait should be enough," Sakaka said solemnly. Marshal Sengoku knew that Sakaski was anxious. He felt the threat from Jun, so he took bold action. Marshal Warring States doesn't want to think about his thoughts and starting point now. Because it makes no sense, Sakaski did not break the law, nor did he violate any Navy regulations or military disciplines. And as Sakaski said, what he did was reasonable and justified. The Navy caught a pirate. What happened? Is there a problem? As a generalissimo, Senguo will be biased in his heart. This is okay. After all, he is also a human being. But in this matter, the first thing Marshal Warring States considered was not the dispute between marshals. These were all internal issues. No matter how big they would only be considered later. Now, his first consideration was how to use Sakaski's results. "You said bait, what is your plan?" Marshal of the Warring States period asked in a deep voice. "Whitebeard is old, and the Whitebeard pirates are facing a very serious problem, that is, they have no successor. Now, it seems that the person most likely to succeed the Whitebeard pirates is the captain of the 2nd Division, T.I. Strange, he may be the secret heir trained by Whitebeard for decades," Sakaski said softly. The Warring States Marshal nodded without speaking. Sakaski continued, "Now that we have captured Teach, the future of the Whitebeard pirates is in our hands. It can be predicted that the Whitebeard pirates have two action plans. The first is just pretend it never happened. But it's unlikely," Marshal Sengoku said without hesitation. "The rules of the Whitebeard pirates are there. Whoever touches their family members will fight to the death. Maybe they have broken the rules several times before, but this time is different. The one who was caught this time is the 2nd generation of the Whitebeard pirates. Not to mention their irregular rules. If the Whitebeard pirates don't respond, then they will face a situation where there is no successor. This situation would be different for the rest of the group. Every time, there is a chance to save. But now, Whitebeard is old, and he does not have so much time to cultivate a new heir. Second point, once he does not respond correctly to this matter, let alone the heir, in this kind of situation during this embarrassing period, the hearts of the Whitebeard pirates are likely to be dispersed. No matter how Newgate thinks, he will not treat this matter as never happening. Because as Sakaski said, the Whitebeard pirates, the future is in the hands of the Navy." As soon as Marshal Sengoku finished speaking, Sakaski nodded and said yes, therefore, for the future of the Whitebeard pirates, no matter what the price, Whitebeard I will definitely fight it. Because if he avoids fighting, the Whitebeard pirates will only slowly die out. I think, with the style of the Whitebeard pirates and Newgate's strong character, he will definitely choose to fight vigorously in the end. Go for this glimmer of hope instead of dying in vain. Marshal Warring States thought about it for a while and found that Sakaski was right. Then, the two of them have reached a common understanding on this matter. That is, by seizing Tikai, they can indeed force a group start and force by Beard goes to war with them. Thinking of this, Marshal Sengoku is a little hot in his heart. If the Whitebeard pirates can be forced away, then their current plan can be straightened out. Although Sakaski's matter is somewhat authentic, such a big one regarding the matter, discuss it with him handsomely and handle it directly. You have to have some feeling of coercion, but the Warring States Marshal didn't care about this. On the contrary, he really admired Sakaski. Be decisive in doing things, be ruthless in your attacks, and hit the vital points immediately. Now if this thing is done, Sakaski will be the first to do it. After the war comes to an end, the battle for marshals will inevitably begin. With Sakaski taking such a big contribution, Jun must let him do whatever it takes. 3 points. After a back and forth, the situation was evened by Sakaski. Next, Sakaski just needs to take the next step. Well, Sakaski's next step is to prepare to express his stance on the world government, hoping to get support from the upper echelons of the world government such as Wu Laoxing. Marshal Warring States probably guessed what Sakaski was thinking at this time. Because he knew very well that Sakaski had no hope for him at all. Sakaski would be very satisfied if he could not be biased for the sake of merit. But the Marshal of the Warring States period still felt a little emotional. After all, it was the fate of man that was not as good as God's. Sakaski thought he was supporting Jun's rise to power. Maybe actually, I do have this idea. But the main reason for entering Jun this time was not because of him from the Warring States period, but because of the people above him. That bastard Orgrim made peace with all the 5 old stars. In other words, even if Sakaski made this move correctly, his retreat would have already been blocked. Maybe others didn't understand it, but as the head of the navy, Sengoku, the general, knew very well that once Kyuzan retired, Jun's ascendancy was irreversible. But just when the Warring States Marshal was about to give Sakaski some advice, he suddenly figured out a twisting thing. Where is Orgrim? Then Wu Laoxing will still care about his previous instructions. It's definitely impossible. Thinking of this, Marshal Sengoku felt a little emotional in his heart. The battle between marshals, an internal matter within the navy, only depends on the outcome of a pirate, which is ridiculous. And Sakaski's suggestion obviously had some effect. The Warring States Marshal felt a little guilty. In the past, Marshal Warring States would never have said anything to Sakaski, but this time, Marshal Warring States stood up, walked to Sakaski, patted him on the shoulder and said, "Sakaski. Kaski, you want to compete for this marshal, right?" Although this matter can be said to be known to everyone, to be honest, Sakaski has never discussed this matter with the Warring States Marshal. After all, he is not Jun and has a good relationship with the Marshal, so he can say such things casually. His relationship with Sakaski and the Warring States Marshal is just so-so. The key is that you discuss with the current Marshal what will happen after he is about to step down. This sounds a bit excessive. Although Sakaski is very straight, he is not so straight. Therefore, when Marshal Warring States opened his mouth at this time, it was the first time that Sakaski formally discussed this issue with Marshal Warring States. I hadn't mentioned it before, but Sakaski was never one to shy away from this kind of thing. So as soon as the Warring States Marshal finished speaking, Sakaski said without hesitation, "Yes, I will definitely fight for this marshal. A navy that doesn't want to be a marshal is not a good navy." Looking at Sakaski's courage, with a resolute face, the Warring States Marshal sighed slightly. In fact, in addition to being a little extreme, Sasuke did something a little extreme. With their dovish ideas, no, in fact, when Warring States thought about it carefully, he was not a dove, except that it was somewhat incompatible with his philosophy as a marshal. In other respects, Sakaski is a good marshal. It's a pity that he met a powerful opponent like Jun. Thinking of this, Marshal Warring States said softly, Sakaski, you are right. A navy that doesn't want to be a marshal is not a good navy. Garp, Gia, they just don't understand these. No matter how capable they are, just how much responsibility must we shoulder to make this trip to this damn world worthwhile? Sakaski didn't speak, but nodded. At least on this point, he had the same views as the Warring States Marshal. When you have the ability, you should shoulder the responsibility. The strong will protect the weak. The righteous navy will benefit the world and protect peace. Isn't this what it should be? I have to say that Sakaski is still a very noble person. It's just that the methods are a bit too drastic. As a veteran, I'll give you one final mention, Sakaski, Marshal of the Warring States period, said earnestly. Sakaski's expression straightened and he said in a deep voice, Marshal, please speak. You are now at a huge disadvantage. If you want to win Jun and take the position of Marshal, you only have one chance. You must not make any mistakes, Marshal Qingdao of the Warring States period. Where are the opportunities? Sakaski had vaguely thought of something in his mind. War, in this war, you can only defeat Orgrim and the Warhammer pirates before you can defeat Jun and become the Marshal. The Warring States Marshal didn't hide anything and said sincerely. Sakaski's eyes were a little confused. He had thought wrong just now and thought that the Marshal would give him some advice to take the upper-level route of the world government. But, what does the replacement of Marshal Jun and our Navy Marshal, have to do with Orgrim? However, it was obvious that the Warring States Marshal had no intention of continuing to explain. Before Sakaski could speak, the Warring States Marshal continued, actually, I'm not very optimistic about you, Sakaski. The styles between you and me are too different. There is no doubt that your rise will make many of the policies I have set before have changed, and your character worries me even more. I am worried that you are too radical and will plunge the Navy into a desperate situation. Therefore, my preferred candidate for Marshal is not you. Sakaski didn't speak, just listened quietly. The Warring States Marshal seemed to let go and continued, however, I just figured it out. This is just my wishful thinking. I unilaterally think that I am right and want to deny your thoughts. This is really old. What about the inherent stubbornness of this guy? In the end, I determined one thing in you, that is, our love for the Navy. Our love may be different, but you and I are both people who put the interests of the Navy at the forefront. In fact, that's enough. At this point, Marshal Warring States looked a little emotional. Finally, he smiled and said, between you and me, the differences in theories and concepts are just differences after all. How can we tell the difference between right and wrong? So Sakaski, do your best, and I promise you that in this martial battle, I will keep things even. As long as you perform well enough and get support, I will let you pick up this marshal's position. A touch of emotion flashed in Sakaski's eyes. Just as the marshal can feel his sincerity towards the Navy, Sakaski can also feel the sincerity in this marshal who has dedicated his life to the Navy. I will do my best to be a marshal and do a good job as a marshal, Sakaski said in a deep voice. Zhang Kuyuan nodded first, then smiled and said, your sudden plan made me a little surprised. If not, we will hold a meeting later and let everyone discuss the follow-up and behave well. Yes, Sakaski said softly. Then, he walked out of the marshal's office. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 726. Holy Land Marijoa. Wulaoxing is drinking tea in the office at this time. To be honest, the situation is so tense now. Logically speaking, Wulaoxing should be very anxious. But it seemed that the 5 of them were enjoying themselves and had no anxious reaction at all. Thinking about it carefully, the 5 of them really had nothing to be anxious about. Because the 5 top bosses of the world government actually hedged their bets at this critical moment and became the biggest fence-sitters in the world government. Navy 1, there's not much to say. Orgrim 1, huh? They are not at a loss either. As expected, he is a man of tactics, with dirty means and dirty heart. The only thing that worried them was the matter between Orgrim and Lord Im. It seemed that the situation was getting out of hand, and Orgrim did not contact them, which made them a little worried. I want to contact Orgrim and ask about the situation. They also felt that speaking like this seemed too weak for them, so even though their hearts were tangled, they could only hold it in. Suffocated. Just as the 5 big guys were sitting and drinking tea, there was a knock on the office door. The 5 old stars responded, and then the door opened and a sturdy figure walked in. The commander-in-chief of the entire army, Cyborg Kong. Although he has been retired from the front line for many years, the naval marshal of that year still looks extremely strong. Even though he is very old, he does not look sluggish at all. He is full of energy and has an aura of iron-blooded perseverance. Cyborg? What's wrong? Big Beard asked. Commander Cyborg held a document in his hand, smiled, handed it to Big Beard and said the application document from the Navy. The bearded man nodded, then took the document and read it with the other 4-5 old stars. At this time, his expression seemed a little surprised. Navy preparing to move to Marineford, the bearded man suddenly raised his head and looked at Commander Cyborg. Commander Cyborg nodded calmly and said yes, the Warring States period is preparing to use this as a clue to the beginning of the war and parachute into Marineford into the New World. Is the Navy ready? The bald king asked in a deep voice at this time. It sounded like his tone was not very happy. Yes, it's ready, just needs the final approval. Commander Cyborg nodded. As soon as he finished speaking, the expressions of the 5 old stars all turned gloomy. The blond man asked in a deep voice, you have known this for a long time. Commander Cyborg didn't hide or quibble about anything. He nodded and said, I knew something in advance. You, the bearded man slammed the table and wanted to say something, but in the end he didn't say it. The 5 old stars didn't know about such a big thing until the end. Can they not be angry? And more importantly, this war, it also has to do with the secret that Orgrim killed Im. As a result, it seems that the Navy is preparing to launch a war, but Orgrim seems to have no reaction. If Orgrim fails to keep up, the 5 old stars will also be in trouble. When did you find out? The blond man asked in a deep voice. Commander Cyborg thought for a moment, and then said, I have heard rumors before, but I didn't take them seriously. The documents were sent to me last night. I had already rested at that time. What I really want is, come on, I should know it in the morning. The 5 old stars looked at each other and felt that Cyborg was not lying. Warring States is determined. He knows that at this time, the war is imminent and no one can touch him. Even if we don't approve this plan, he will definitely continue to do it, right? The bald king said helplessly. Commander Cyborg thought for a moment, nodded and said, Warring States seems to be easy to talk to on weekdays, but when you get angry and stubborn, no one can persuade you. That guy has taken all the responsibility on himself. After this battle, no matter whether he wins or loses, he has no intention of taking the position of marshal. Fada Lao also shook his head and said. Although the Warring States period felt that the 5 old stars would not collaborate with Orgrim. But the previous incident of Jun being taken care of still made him feel that the 5 old stars seemed unreliable. He had some doubts about Wulaoxing. Even if the suspicion was very weak, he did not want to gamble on the future of the Navy on this matter. Therefore, he suppressed all his war plans. Wulaoxing was not in vain. How is the Navy going to fight? I even thought that they didn't come up with any plan. As a result, when it came to a kick, warring states turned over. Now, even if Wulaoxing wants to do something, he probably won't be able to do it. What's more, warring states was just a little suspicious. In fact, he felt that the possibility of Wulaoxing collaborating with the enemy on this matter was very small, but he was cautious and unwilling to gamble. Now that he has brought things to such an extent, he has offended Wulaoxing terribly, and at the same time, he has blocked his own escape route. In this way, no matter whether he can lead the navy to win this war, after it is over, he will no longer have to be a marshal. Wulaoxing will not let an uncontrolled marshal appear in the navy. However, warring states felt that it was not bad. After all, I was ready to retire after finishing this job, and I had no intention of continuing to be a marshal. As for the commander-in-chief of the army, well, when I first took office as marshal, I still had some expectations. Now, I don't want to play anymore. Being a marshal is so tiring. As a commander-in-chief, please spare me, a 70-year-old baby. Therefore, warring states had no worries at all, and he was not ready to continue doing it anyway. If you 5 old stars still can't bear it, then at worst I won't even be in the navy. I have saved some savings over the years. Wouldn't it be nice to retire and travel around the world? Listening to Wulaoxing's words, Commander Cyborg also nodded. Judging from the current situation, he also saw the determination of the warring states guy. Unstoppable. Now even if Wulaoxing calls for a halt, warring states will face it head on. Anyway, this year's military expenditure has been obtained. I am going to fight this war. I'll wait until the war is over to determine what punishments there will be. And at this juncture, even if Wulaoxing wanted to replace the Marshal Sengoku, he couldn't. Once he changed, the navy would have a big problem, and Orgrim would probably laugh out loud. Even though they were hedging their bets, the 5 old stars really had no intention of favoring Orgrim. Or a real sword or a real gun, each depends on his or her ability. If you don't do it next time, go ahead, Cyborg. The blonde man could only say this in the end. What else can he do? Beat up Cyborg, the commander-in-chief? Impossible. Maybe Cyborg heard some rumors in advance and suppressed the rumors in Mary Joa. Spread. But this is not too much, because warring states did not report to Cyborg before this. As the commander-in-chief of the entire army, it is reasonable for people to suppress rumors. And for so many years, Cyborg has done well. The 5 old stars liked and approved of him, so they had no intention of pursuing him. Commander Cyborg nodded and said, "I'm sorry to bother you 5 adults." After he finished speaking, he didn't stop for anything, turned around and left the office. After Cyborg left, the 5 old stars sat together and looked at each other, and the atmosphere was a little awkward for a while. There is no doubt that the Navy has already we are ready for war. The warring states period is about to parachute Marijoya to the new world. But Orgrim didn't seem ready yet. This makes the 5 old stars a little troublesome. If they tell Orgrim that the warring states period is about to start a war, they are definitely collaborating with the enemy. If he didn't say anything, he would be a little worried about Im's incident. The public interests of the world government collide with the private interests of the 5 old stars. Several people had obviously thought about this matter, but no one spoke first. Just when the bald king was losing his composure, suddenly, the phone on his desk rang. The blond man glanced at it, and then said in surprise, "It's Orgrim." Regardless, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. At least there is movement on Orgrim's side. The bald king quickly answered the phone and said, "Orgrim. Oh, I haven't heard your voice for a long time, and I still miss you, boss," Orgrim said with a smile. Listening to his smiling voice, the bald king felt a little relieved for some reason. "How about it? On your side?" The bald king didn't just talk nonsense to Orgrim, he quickly asked. "Not to mention my side, I just want to remind you that the Navy is about to start a war with us. I wonder if you have received the notice? Gee ha 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 ha, Orgrim laughed. The expressions of the 5 old stars all changed. Damn it, we 5 old stars only found out about this a few minutes ago, and you Orgrim actually knew about it too? This makes everyone very embarrassed. The bald king glanced around, then pretended that I already knew it, and said in a very calm tone, of course. Orgrim didn't know about the turmoil between the Warring States period and the 5 old stars, and said with a little surprise, I really underestimated your moral character, noble. He really didn't doubt anything. When the Navy starts a war with the pirates, as the top level of the world government, isn't it normal to know the arrangements of his subordinates in advance? Therefore, he now admires the moral character of the 5 old stars a little. In the contest between public interests and private interests, the fact that they did not leak the news to themselves in advance shows that they chose to protect public interests. Amazing, amazing. The 5 old stars felt a little embarrassed when they heard Orgrim's praise. After all, they really hadn't made up their minds before. Ahem, this is what we should do. Although we are closely cooperating with evil parties like you, Orgrim, don't underestimate us. The bald king took advantage of the situation and said. Alas, this comparison, it just pretended first, no one will know anyway. Orgrim smacked his lips. Although he felt that the moral integrity of the 5 old stars was quite high, he did not continue to praise him. Instead, he said, that's all right, you can invite that Lord let's, where to kill him with your hands, what is the right choice? In other words, where can you take him? If not, just stay in Marija. Are you going to take action too? The bald king asked in surprise. In a war, I have to fight for the upper hand from the beginning. The Navy is going to ride on my face, so I have to take action quickly? Orgrim said with a smile. The bald king thought for a moment, okay, and said, we will let you know when we have arranged this matter. Don't be absent. Don't worry, there's no way I'll be absent from this matter. I'll definitely help you kill that Orgrim said with a smile. No one on either side asked about the other's war deployment. Orgrim did not ask how the Navy would start the war. The 5 old stars also did not ask how Orgrim would respond. This is what the two sides, there is a tacit understanding. Don't always ask questions that will embarrass the other party. After all, if you ask them, the other party may not answer, and they may think that you are a bit too pushy. After chatting for a while, Orgrim hung up the phone. Looking at the phone bug in his hand, the bald king said softly, this guy is really amazing. We were all deceived by the Warring States period internally, but he actually saw the secret from the outside. He has always had a keen sense of war, hasn't he? The blond man said softly. The other 5 old stars also smiled back. Before, I was a little worried that Orgrim would not be able to carry it. Now it's fine. Don't worry anymore. You can start arranging things for Lord I don't know if that adult is interested, see the war from the front line up close, the bald king said with a smile. It's unlikely, but you can try. The bearded man raised his eyebrows and said. It's best not to take action in Marijoya. After all, this is the Holy Land. Once Orgrim takes action here, Marijoya will suffer heavy losses no matter what. It would be great if I could trick Lord into going to the front line to watch the war show. Feeler reminds you, 3 things about reading: collect, recommend, and share. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 727. Naval Headquarters, Marineford. At this time, Kuzan, Porosalino, Sakaski, Jun, and others were all heading to the Sengoku Marshal's office. The affairs of the Chambord Islands have already come to an end. Neither Porosalino nor Jun did anything there that would cause a chain reaction. But they didn't know that Orgrim, a cunning guy, had already discovered something was wrong. Rayleigh took action and blocked Porisalino in the end. The Straw Hat Pirates, regardless of the coding, escaped from the Shampoo Islands in embarrassment and estimated that they should have gone to the Devil's Triangle Sea now. But these are small things that no one cares about. At the same time, Andrest and his party continued to stay on the Shampoo Islands. It was not until Rayleigh's coding was completed that they followed Jinbi to visit Fishman Island. Given their status, going to Fishman Island would really feel like going home. Nowadays, it is a gap period, just suitable for the development of supernovas. The Navy is busy waging war with pirates in the New World. On the pirate side, big guys like Orgrim don't bother to pay attention to the newcomers. The period of civil war has passed, and now they want to work in the Navy. As the saying goes, heroes are made in troubled times. Perhaps at this time when supernovas enter the New World, a showdown between the Navy and pirates will also break out. Such a chaotic sea area is just suitable for these little guys who have not been able to enter the stage of the times. After the chaos is over, who is a hero or a hero depends on their ability. It's not a meeting of senior generals, it's just a meeting of the real big guys. So as soon as he entered the office, Jun saw Zifa, Garp, Ahe, and others there. After nodding to each other, the three generals and the chief inspector sat down together. This is when the Warring States Marshal also spoke at the right time. Marineford's military strength has been assembled. Is it time to laugh? Marshal Sengoku asked. As Fujitora Isuke's old leader, Jun is also the general inspector of the headquarters, so she knows Fujitora Isho's dynamics very well. It will arrive in the afternoon, and we have just entered Marijoya. Jun said in a deep voice. Marshal Sengoku nodded and said, very good, everything is ready. Has the document been approved by the above? Consultant Ahe asked suddenly. Marshal Warring States glanced at her, and then said softly, the document was sent over yesterday evening. I guess Wulaoxing has read it by now, right? Warring States didn't say anything about approval or disapproval. He just said that he had already applied. And the meaning of this statement was understood by all the bosses. That is, the Marshal is about to face the front. It doesn't matter whether the world government approves it or not. Approved, I am going to do it anyway. And this also conveys a fairly accurate signal. That is, no matter what the outcome of this war is, he is not allowed to be this Marshal in the Warring States period anyway. Although I understood everything, no one showed anything strange. Sakaski, after Marineford landed in the New World, you gave the news about Marshal D. Teach directly to the News of the World and asked them to publish it immediately. At the same time, prepare for a public execution, Marshal Sengoku said solemnly. This is also a credit, but that Gaitek was captured by Sakaski. Although Jun and others were a little surprised, they had to admire him, let alone go at this time. It's shameful to take such credit. When Sakaski saw that the Marshal had indeed leveled a bowl of water, he felt a little excited and said calmly, yes, I promise to complete the mission. Marshal Warring States nodded first, then glanced around the crowd and said, this war must be fought quickly, accurately, and ruthlessly. If we catch the Whitebeard pirates, we will kill them directly. No one is allowed to stay. Hand. Go all out. As soon as the Warring States Marshal finished speaking, whether it was Garp or Zifa, all the big guys straightened their bodies, sat up straighter, and said at the same time, everything is for justice. Originally in the story of the battle on the top, the Navy seemed to be going all out. In fact, except for Sakaski, who was working hard, the rest of the people were just actors, paddling. Kyuzan, which is so powerful that it can freeze the entire sea area in an instant with just a breath, but in Marineford, it just can't catch up with the submarine. Lino, my 8-foot Kayang Megatama just turned on the plug-in and can't hit it. At that time, the prices of these two generals were high, and they seemed to be doing nothing but doing nothing. The Kibutai under the king who is cooperating with the rest of the army is even more cheating, So let's not mention it, and candidates for generals like Jun and Cake, whose strength is not inferior to that of admirals, did not appear at all. Zifa, the old principal who had not yet left the navy at that time, did not show up. The naval marshal of the Warring States period just stood on the execution platform and gibbered. Anyway, he would not take action until the critical moment. Not to mention Garp, his grandson is kneeling on it to die. He already has a high level of moral integrity even if he doesn't betray the enemy. How can he be expected to go all out to fight the Whitebeard pirates? Non-existent. It's amazing that he punched Marco, and then was knocked away by Luffy. After that, he almost lost control and wanted to kill Sakazuki. Looking at the entire audience, Sakazuki was the only one who fought from bottom to top, punching the captain, kicking Whitebeard, and then chasing the remnants. It seemed as if he was the only general in the navy. It was as if Marineford was a big stage and everyone else was an actor, but Sakazuki took the script seriously. I don't know why the navy made such a response at that time, even so superficially. Maybe it had more profound meaning and arrangements. After all, Sakazuki was not a fool, so it was impossible for him not to feel it, but the fact that he did not complain meant that he accepted the arrangement. Or maybe it was because of his outstanding performance that he succeeded in taking the position of marshal after the war. Not to mention how perfunctory the Navy's performance was during the war. After all, there are many conspiracy theories. Maybe the Warring States Marshal proposed to move the headquarters to the New World, but the 5 Old Stars did not agree. So the Warring States period took the opportunity to let Whitebeard destroy Marineford during the war. Doesn't this mean we have to move even if we don't move? But this time it was different. This time, the Warring States period was betting on the Navy's national destiny in the New World. If they don't succeed, they will be defeated. Once they lose, the Navy will not be able to enter the New World for at least 20 years. In other words, once the battle is lost, the New World will completely become the territory of pirates in the next 20 years. If they counterattack after 20 years, they will not know how much effort they will have to put in. Therefore, the Warring States period has already stated at this time that it will go all out to start this war. Every big boss in the Navy, including Zifa, a disabled man who has retired, will be there. Judging from the current posture of the Navy, the top players include Sengoku, Garp, Ahe, Zifa, Jun, Cake, Fujitora Isho, Sakazuki, Porosalino, and Kuzan. In addition, there are also elite naval lieutenants. In the end, the Warring States Marshal was also planning to invite some of the Shichibukai kings to join the war. He was striving for excellence this time, so he didn't consider it at all like he did during the original battle at the top. He invited all the 7 warriors under the king to help him, regardless of whether there were bastards or traitors among them. Nowadays, the presence of the king's Shichibukai is extremely low. Doflamingo doesn't need to think about it. The Warring States Marshal has already planned to forcibly deprive Doflamingo of the name of the king's Shichibukai after Marineford enters the New World. Then, Moonlight Moria and Marshal Lee of the Warring States period didn't want to pay attention to him. It would be best for you to die in the Devil's Triangle and never come out. There is no need to think too much about Jinbei, the hero of the Flower Sea. On the Shampoo Islands, in order to protect the Evernight pirates, he dared to fight against Porosalino. Pulled to participate in this war, maybe he is a young man. Therefore, Marshal Sengoku immediately eliminated Jinbei from his options. Of course, he had no intention of depriving Jinbei of the title of King of the Shichibukai. After all, Jinbei's reign as King of the Shichibukai was the result of relatively special policies and circumstances. As long as Jinbei rebelled without knowing it, Marshal Sengoku was not prepared to touch him. After Crocodile left the Shichibukai, the Navy and the world government did not replenish this position. Therefore, there are only 6 people in the Shichibukai under the king so far, including Doflamingo, a bright young man. The last 3 are red-haired Shanks, Tyrant Bartholomew Bear, and Whitebeard to Edward Weeble. In fact, the Marshal of the Warring States period wanted to capture all three of them as young men. But Edward Weeble gave up after he thought twice. Because this guy has a brain problem and thinks he is Whitebeard's biological son. What if this guy really fights on the battlefield and gets married to Whitebeard? Isn't the Navy embarrassed? 0. As for Bartholomew Bear, there is no need to say anything else. He has been completely transformed. The reason why he did not appear on the Shampoo Islands was because he arranged a wave of Straw Hat pirates just like in the original story. It's because, before this, he had been completely transformed. No one knows what twists and tricks there are inside. Anyway, on the surface, he is just a war weapon, the strongest kind. Therefore, the Warring States Marshal undoubtedly wanted to take Bartholomew Bear with him to the battlefield. Then, there is the red-haired Shanks. In fact, the Warring States Marshal is still very wary of Shanks. But recently, Shanks has performed really well and helped the Navy complete a lot of things. The attitude of a loyal dog. Although Marshal Sengoku did not believe that Shanks would really become the Navy's loyal dog. But he felt that at least in this war, Shanks should be able to stand with the Navy. Because what he may have to face are his former enemies. Needless to say, Whitebeard, although he has no big hatred, is not the same as Shanks. Then, Orgrim, Crocodile, Kaido, these people all have grudges against Shanks. So after thinking for a long time, the Warring States Marshal finally decided to recruit the red-haired Shanks of the Shichibukai and the tyrant Bartholomew Bear to join the Navy to join the war. From this point of view, the Navy's top combat power exploded directly. The background of the Overlord of the Sea is so profound that no one can compare with it. According to this formation to deal with the Whitebeard pirates, Marshal Sengoku thought about it and felt that there was no possibility of losing. Therefore, at this time, the Warring States Marshal still had a majestic and high-spirited attitude. I just wanted to kill Whitebeard to death as quickly as possible, crush the Whitebeard pirates, and then with the power of victory, it would be best to take down Orgrim in one go. In this way, I feel like I can rest in peace even if I die. After looking around at everyone, Marshal Warring States was very satisfied with the current morale of the Navy. He nodded and said, "Very good." Everyone restrains their subordinates. When the smile comes, immediately launch the Marineford relocation plan and enter the New World. Until now, only these big guys know that the Warring States Marshal is moving the Navy headquarters to the New World. What Warring States was thinking about was to wait until everyone went to heaven before lifting the confidentiality of the news. That's almost it then. This unexpected effect should have been achieved. After everyone responded, Marshal of the Warring States period nodded and said, "Everything is for the sake of justice. Let's break up the meeting and make preparations." Feeler reminds you, 3 things about reading: collect, recommend, and share. A Sledgehammer Breaks into Pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 728. As expected, Fujitora arrived at Marineford that afternoon. When he arrived, Marshal Warring States also happened to receive approval from Marijoa. He also knew that although he had received the official approval, in fact, he had been forced into the palace, and he had offended Wulaoxing and the others miserably. But it was just a sigh of relief. When he made this decision, he, the Warring States Marshal, had already risked his life. Anyway, after finishing this job, I will retire. Love, so and so. As soon as the approval document arrived in his hand, Fujitora smiled and took his place, and Marshal Sengoku no longer had any hesitation. That afternoon, Marineford, the naval headquarters that had stood on the first half of the Great Line for more than 800 years, experienced a huge shock. Those who didn't know better thought it was Whitebeard attacking. From the marshal to the general, from the general to the chief inspector, the chief staff officer, and finally to the various lieutenant generals, they all began to restrain the panicked subordinates. The huge island of Marineford, together with the large number of fleets staying in the harbor, all slowly ascended to the sky with the blessing of Fujitora Yuxiao's ability. There were still a large number of warships on guard in the waters surrounding Marineford, blocking news. At the same time, heavy fog and smoke began to fill the sea area, hiding the huge movement inside. It's Smoker the White Hunter. At this time, Smoker kept flying around Marineford, spitting out countless white smoke, hiding this fortress of justice. Although Smoker's strength seems a bit embarrassing, he is a natural ability user after all. Now if you ask him to fight against the top masters, he may not be able to withstand 3 or 5 moves, but if you ask him to go all out to spit out smoke, you are actually just venting the huge natural energy contained in his body, and he can still do it. Did it? But this is still not an easy job for Smoker. With a cigar in his mouth and flying around Marineford for 26 times, Smoker always felt that he was specially recruited from the East China Sea to return to the headquarters just because he wanted to do this. At the headquarters, do you think of yourself as a tool, and have you made clear arrangements for it? Although he was confused in his heart, he didn't complain about anything. He was just a major general. If he didn't look at the capabilities of G-5, would it be worse for Lieutenant General Yuxiao? That's the real tool man. At the gate of the Fortress of Justice in Marineford, the Warring States Marshal held a phone bug, wore a white suit and the Navy's only marshal-level justice cloak, and walked out of it like a dragon or a tiger. So far, all the plans he had arranged were going smoothly, and Marineford was also lifted into the air. Marshal of the Warring States period was naturally excited and delighted. Porisalino, you continue to explore. The airspace along Marineford's trajectory must be cleared. No creature can be allowed to enter. Even if it is a bird, you must kill it, Marshal Warring States said to the phone bug as he walked. Although Marshal Warring States intended to lift the confidentiality of Marineford's internal information after Marineford took off, this was not the case with the outside world. Now that Marineford is flying in the air, there are thousands of Marines are nesting here. If this news leaks out, it will be too dangerous. If nothing else, if that guy Shiji comes after hearing the news, it will be a disaster. Maybe nothing will happen to the top combat power, but those elite naval soldiers are probably not going to survive. Therefore, the Warring States Marshal is still blocking the news from the outside world. After hanging up the phone, he walked towards the Justice Square. After a while, son, I met Jun, who was also dressed in formal clothes and wearing the cloak of justice. How's it going? After the two people came together, Marshal Warring States was the first to ask. Everything is normal. All phone signal waves are monitored. At the same time, we can only use the internal signal route of our Navy, and the rest of the signal routes are blocked. Jun smiled and nodded, and after a slight pause, he continued, even the contact you, the Generalissimo, had with General Porisalino just now is within the monitoring range. Marshal Warring States nodded, but still felt a little uneasy, so he said all contacts and the use of telephone bugs are all prepared. If you use it without applying for registration, you will be scrutinized strictly. Really cool, UN said something, nodded quickly and said yes, everything is for justice. Not to mention, Marshal Sengoku did this trick with some undercover agents and spies hidden in the Navy. After all, the Navy is so big, they will send spies to other forces, and other forces will also add sand to the Navy. This makes sense. But here, there is no undercover agent of the Warhammer pirates. There was only one undercover agent in the Avalon department in the Navy, and that was Fergo. At that time, Fergo had already reached the rank of lieutenant general, and the higher up the ranks were candidate general and general. It can be said that he is already a senior member of the Navy, so there is no point in continuing to release people into the Navy. After all, Fergo knows everything that should be known. If Fergo doesn't know, then the undercover doesn't even want to know. What's more, neither Orgrim nor Doflamingo usually use Fergo's line at all, not even this line, let alone other lines. If Fergo was still in Marineford at this time, perhaps after discovering the plan to airborne to the New World, he would risk everything, even if he exposed himself, to pass the news to his young master. But, Virgo is currently in the G-3 army base in the New World and knows nothing about this place. Therefore, let alone the warring states marshal, he completely suppressed the news and no one could leak it. At first, when Marineford took off, the Navy generals and soldiers were surprised. But now, normal order has been restored, and even the rest of the Navy's arrangements have begun to operate effectively. For example, Sakaski and his subordinates are actively building an execution platform. In the center of the square, Fujitora held a cane and knife in his hand and stuck it on the ground. Looking from a distance, one could feel a powerful force of intimidation around him, constantly overflowing from his body. At the same time, there was also that mysterious and inexplicable energy, which was continuously transmitted from the staff and knife in his hand into the ground of Marineford. I have to say that Fujitora's strength is really strong, and his abilities are quite exaggerated. He can be compared with the top superpowers such as Orgrim, Whitebeard, Shiji, etc., and the fruit ability is classified as the most powerful. One of the top superhuman abilities. An entire Marineford island, with the blessing of his ability, flew into the sky. How could it not be awesome? But in the final analysis, Fujitora's ability to smile is not Shiki's fluttering fruit. He cannot be as proficient as Shiki, who can fly to the sky on a dozen islands at a time. At this time, a Marineford had already made Fujitora Yuxia feel strenuous. Yes, he likes to pull meteorites down from the sky, and he looks like a powerful group, but he doesn't like to push meteorites up into the sky. The level of ability used here is very different. He may be able to pull meteorites down from the sky at will, but you ask him to send a meteorite out of the sky at will? The use of this ability is a bit too forceful, but fortunately Fujitora's strength is strong enough and he is an out-and-out monster. I can still hold on. Kyuzan was guarding Fujitora Yuxiao at this time. Even though this was the Navy headquarters, this was the base camp of justice. But at this moment, no one dares to show any slightness. If any assassin really messes up Yuxiao, everyone will follow suit. Marshal Sengoku came over and looked at Fujitora, who was constantly exuding inexplicable abilities. A smile appeared on his face. He walked up and asked, "How does it feel, Ichiji?" Fujitora smiled helplessly. He said, "It is difficult to do, but you can still hold on. Although it is a bit difficult, moving Marineford to the New World is indeed within his capabilities. Can bear it." Marshal Sengoku did not say any false words of concern. He nodded seriously, reached out and patted Fujitora on the shoulder, and then asked, "Can the speed be faster? How many days will it take?" Fujitora thought about it. After a moment, he said, "The speed can be faster, but I'm afraid it will affect the overall structure of the island. Judging from the current speed, it will probably take." Here Fujitora Yuxiao and the Warring States Marshal were discussing these things. On the other side, in Avalon, the Sea of Eternal Night, Orgrim was sitting on the sofa at home, holding a cigar in his mouth and reading a newspaper in his hand. There was no special news in the newspaper, but it did publish some fancy news, some of which were interesting, and even made Orgrim's mouth curl up slightly with a smile. Not far in front of him, Morgans, the president of News of the World, was sitting there. Although his expression was very serious, even if Orgrim was reading the newspaper and ignored him, he did not dare to slack off in any way. But to be honest, his condition was much better than the previous few times he came. After all, he has had face-to-face contact with Mr. Chui many times. He knows very well that in most cases, as long as he doesn't deliberately make Master Chui angry, Master Chui is a very easy to talk to and can even joke around with you. He thought about it for a while and found that he had not provoked this big boss recently, so he felt very calm, thinking that maybe the big boss had some orders for him. Gee ha 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 ha, there is no big news in the recent newspapers. After Orgrim read the newspaper, he threw it aside with a smile. Morgans quickly said that must be because we are not professional enough. After I go back, I will teach those guys a lesson and let them work hard to find some big news. Your flattery is getting louder and louder, Orgrim said with a smile. Morgans also looked smiling and didn't care. I called you here this time to tell you that something big is going to happen soon. Orgrim didn't have anything to do with Morgans, he said very calmly. Morgans's eyes lit up, and he asked with a slightly excited tone, Master Hammer, could it be, a war is about to begin? Orgrim nodded, then sounded a little angry. Said I didn't plan to start a war. As you know, I, Orgrim, am a peace-loving person. I don't even go out to Avalon very often. Morgan's face twitched slightly, but fortunately there was a feather to block it. Peace-loving. In the past 20 years of the New World, which war have you not participated in? It even feels like most of them were initiated by you. But he didn't dare to complain about anything, so he nodded quickly and said, Master Hammer, you are right. Who doesn't know that you are the benchmark for peace in the New World? Orgrim became more and more pleased with Morgans, and after exhaling a puff of smoke, Orgrim added, but the Navy has gone too far. As you know, they have built many new bases in the New World. That's okay. I think everyone should not provoke anyone and stay quiet. It's okay to just don't cross the line in everything, but what? They have to push even further. Morgans knew that this was getting to the point. He sat up a little more upright and asked softly, Master Zui, this what happened to the Navy? What did it do? They are so despicable. They actually captured Marshal Dichi, the captain of the 2nd Division of the Whitebeard Pirates. Look, they are about to take this opportunity to start a war with us. Orgrim said angrily. He seemed to be fighting for the Whitebeard Pirates and teach. Morgans. Master Hammer, when did you have such a good relationship with the Whitebeard Pirates? Feel remind you, 3 things about reading, collect, recommend, and share. Support the original creation of Follow Novel Network, b.follow.com, and enjoy it as much as possible. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 729. I was a little confused at first, but soon, Morgans came to his senses. What? The captain of the 2nd Division of the Whitebeard Pirates, who is currently in the limelight. Marshal D. Teach. Caught by the Navy. As the owner of the News of the World, Morgans is not just a newspaper seller, he is also a big journalist. Therefore, he obtained intelligence and information very quickly. Marshal D. Teach. He's certainly no stranger either. This is a guy who had no reputation before. Until, he provoked the Hammer Pirates. For a devil fruit, he fought with Don Quixote, Doflamingo, and Caranda Neiman. In the end, it almost caused a new round of war between the Whitebeard Pirates and the Warhammer Pirates. Fortunately, in the end, the Whitebeard Pirates bowed their heads, and Teach came to Avalon to plead guilty to the Warhammer Pirates. Do not you know why? Maybe Mr. Hammer doesn't really want to fall out with the Whitebeard Pirates at this time. In short, that Teach, after offending Mr. Hammer, was able to walk out of Avalon intact, which is already considered very powerful. This is the first time that Teach has entered the world's attention. Then, this guy started cheating, returned to the Whitebeard Pirates, and quickly filled the Whitebeard Pirates' 2nd Division captain position that had been vacant for more than 20 years. That's not all. After that, he also participated in several battles, large and small, showing his great strength. Then, there was news on the sea. Calling him Blackbeard, this name has some profound meaning. After all, he joined the Whitebeard pirates and became the captain of the 2nd Division, but he was called Blackbeard. Is this a bit disrespectful to Newgate? Not at all. Soon, some news spread vaguely on the sea. Hitiki was valued by Newgate and would be trained by Whitebeard. In the future, he would become the 2nd-generation captain of the Whitebeard Thieves Group 303. In other words, maybe in the future, when Newgate goes west, the Whitebeard Pirates will be renamed the Blackbeard Pirates. This is not a treasonous thing. On the sea, if there is a pirate group to pass on, usually the 2nd generation will change its name. This is reasonable. If Orgrim retires and Andrest takes over the current Warhammer Pirates, it may be changed to the Evernight Pirates by then. No one will think this is wrong. In short, after this rumor was released, the Whitebeard Pirates did not deny anything. It can even be seen that Whitebeard himself has cultivated and favored Teach even more. This undoubtedly confirms the rumors. Everyone regards Teach as the secret confidant that Whitebeard cultivated decades ago, just to calm people's hearts and succeed him on the throne at such moments. Morgans thought so before. The results of it? Now Master Chui actually told him that this guy named Teach was captured by the Navy. In just a moment, he seemed to have seen the furious expression of the once strongest man. There is no doubt that with the current state of the Whitebeard Pirates, Newgate will never give up. Even if he takes the Whitebeard Pirates to fight, he will definitely save this guy named Teach. Because Tiki is the future of the Whitebeard Pirates. The older a person gets, the more they will value this inheritance and future. Therefore, Morgan seems to have seen the footsteps of war, firmly landed in the New World, and also made a hole in the ground. No one can stop it. But soon, he reacted and asked with some surprise, Master Chui, I am concerned about this Tiki. A few days ago, our world news also heard that he fought with the Navy in the New World Portal Sea. Well, it seems that in G-3's Virgo, after the two had a battle, the Navy was defeated. Orgrim grinned and said with an evil smile, fake news, next one. Morgans. He didn't know why Master Chui said this, but in that case, with Master Chui's structure and status, there was no need to lie to himself here. Therefore, he immediately chose to believe Orgrim's words and regarded them as fake news. At this time, Morgans was in a state of shock, but after all, he had been doing journalism for decades. After a while, he calmed down. Something happened to Teach and it had nothing to do with him. It's just that the news of the world has one more hit point, which seems to be a good thing. But Lord Chui called him here, which proved that there must be something he wanted to do. So Morgans took a deep breath and said, I wonder, Mr. Hammer, what do you need me to do for you? Orgrim nodded, and then said, I just wanted to say hello to you first, Monet. Orgrim called, and after a while, Monet walked out of the room with a document in his hand. Without speaking, Orgrim gave a signal with his eyes, and Monet handed over the document. Morgans. Morgans was holding the document in his hand, with a strange expression on his face. What does this mean? Take a look first, Grimm said softly. Morgans nodded and quickly flipped through the pages. Then, his expression became very surprised. Pirate Alliance turned out to be an alliance declaration, and directly included the pirate forces in the entire New World, including but not limited to the Warhammer Pirates, Beasts Pirates, Whitebeard Pirates, and Crocodile Pirates group. It directly covered all the four emperors. The meaning of the declaration is to twist the entire New World pirate forces into one rope under the support of the Warhammer Pirates and start a war with the Navy. Of course, this alliance is limited to this war. After it is over, everyone will disband and everyone will do their own thing. After all, Orgrim knows very well that pirates can never truly become an orderly whole, so then they are not pirates, right? After reading it, Morgans looked shocked, and then asked in a low voice, Master Hammer, this alliance. Don't be so anxious and flustered. Kaido and I are the only ones who recognize this declaration. Agum smiled and said. Morgans was slightly relieved. If such a big change happened in the New World, as the president of the news of the world, he didn't know anything. He felt like an idiot. Now, I am relieved, it turns out that it has not been implemented yet. But judging from the current situation, once the Navy takes action against the Whitebeard pirates, there is no reason for that Newgate guy not to stand with me. Ogre smiled. Morgans thought for a moment and nodded, that was indeed the case. The Navy has captured Teach, and Whitebeard is definitely going to fuck him up. At other times, it can be regarded as a private matter of the Whitebeard pirates, and it doesn't matter whether other people interfere or not, and it is even inappropriate to interfere. Newgate may not let others intervene. But now, the situation is different. Whitebeard must be able to see that once he takes action against the Navy, he will immediately bring the entire New World into war. This is no longer a matter of his pirate group, but of all the pirates in the New World. Then when Orgrim wants to take the lead, Newgate really has no reason to refuse, and he can also get strong support because of it. No matter how you look at it, the Whitebeard pirates have no need or reason to oppose this declaration of alliance. Nakrikdal, Morgans asked again after thinking for a while. A flash of light flashed in Orgrim's eyes, and he whispered, Morgans, what I have decided on is a declaration that both Kaido and Whitebeard recognize. Do you think Crocodile dares to say no? Previously, Crocodile said when the phone bug came, Orgrim had already hinted to him to watch the news and told him that when he needed to stand up, he would stand up quickly. He believed that when the declaration was published in the newspapers, Crocodile would understand what he meant. If he insists on pretending to be confused, then Orgrim is not going to be polite to him. He will first let the Whitebeard pirates stand up and kill him. Crocodile. It won't really cost much anyway. Morgans thought the same thing. He recognized 3 of the 4 emperors, and they were still the 3 strongest. Crocodile was just the bottom one, a tool barely used to maintain the 4 emperors' structure. Dare he disagree? Maybe there won't be any need for Mr. Hammer to take action by then, the other big guys will be able to hold him to death. Once Crocodile also approves this declaration, this will be a pirate alliance recognized by the 4 emperors of the New World. 89% of the pirates in the New World are attached to the 4 emperors. The entire pirate alliance is here. The rest of the big cats and kittens are of little significance. When the time comes, the battle between the Navy and the pirates will really happen. After thinking about this, Morgans asked Master Zui, what do you want me to do? Take this declaration with you, be prepared to report it, and wait and see. Soon, the Navy will send you news about Teach. They will lend your hand to spread the news to the entire world. Forcing the Whitebeard pirates to fight as soon as possible, the location should be Marineford. Orgrim smiled and said. It seems that the Navy is preparing to concentrate its forces to force the Whitebeard pirates out of the New World and annihilate them in Marineford. Then, even if the obstacles in front of the New World's Gateway Sea area are swept away, the Navy will seize this opportunity. Insert into the New World in one breath and start a war, Morgans couldn't help but ask. Orgrim nodded slightly. Although there were some discrepancies, Orgrim now estimated the Navy's plan in this way. He really didn't expect that Warring States was planning to directly attack Marineford. Airborne to the New World. That's about it. That's all I have to tell you. You take the manuscript back, and when I contact you again, I want this Pirate Alliance declaration to spread all over the world. Do you understand? Orgrim said in a deep voice. Feeling the pressure from Lord Hammer, Morgans quickly assured, leave it to me, Lord Hammer, I am professional in this matter. Well, do it well, this is big news, and it will be good for you, right? Orgrim laughed again. Of course, I would also like to thank Mr. Chewy for taking care of me. Morgans quickly flattered him again. After that, Morgans didn't have anything left. After drinking a cup of tea and chatting for a while, Orgrim was a little uninterested, so Morgans said goodbye very wisely. After the big news guy left, Monet asked Master Chewy, "What's next? You said 2 days ago that you wanted me to remind you to contact the Whitebeard pirates." "Ha ha ha, fake news. That Teach is still active in the sea, that guy Nyuga. I need to contact him and let him make some preparations." Orgrim smiled and said. But soon, he patted the sofa and said, "Eat first, and then catch up with the old guy after dinner." Falu reminds you, 3 things about reading: collect, recommend, and share. Support original works of Falu Novel Network, b.faloo.com, and enjoy all the original works. A Sledgehammer Breaks into Pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 730. Moby Dick. Newgate was not sitting in his captain's chair on the deck. Instead, he was resting in the cabin. Recently, he always felt a little uneasy, as if something bad was going to happen. But he thought about it, but he had no clue. This is not something incredible. In fact, many top players sometimes have a whim and have a premonition of something. In the original story, Ace was going to hunt down Teach, and Newgate had this reaction. He instinctively felt that this matter would have serious consequences. Therefore, Ace is strictly prohibited from pursuing Teach. He also admitted that it was only this time, saying that this was the only time he could let it go. But Ace's belief is very firm, and he must capture Teach and wash away the stigma on Whitebeard. After all, the Whitebeard pirates have only one iron rule, and that is not to harm their companions. This guy Teach happened to break this iron law. If you don't catch him back in terms of reputation, Newgate, who has traveled all over the world for decades, will indeed bear some stigma in his old age. From a spectator's point of view, Ace was indeed a bit disobedient, too stubborn, blindly arrogant, and finally ended up like this. But from the perspective of the Whitebeard pirates, Ace did nothing wrong. His subordinates committed such a serious crime, and as the captain, he should solve the problem. Otherwise, how could he be worthy of Whitebeard's kindness to him? If this happened, 030 Ace really listened to Newgate's words and pretended that it never happened. Then he is no longer Ace, and he is even less worthy of being the captain of this second division. In short, no one is wrong here, it can only be said that Teach is too cunning. Now, Newgate also felt something bad, but he had no signs of it. After thinking again and again, Newgate said Marco. Not long after he finished speaking, the door was opened and Marco walked in. "Dad, what are your orders?" Marco asked. "Any news on Teach?" "Long time no see or contact me," Newgate asked. Marco shook his head, and then said no contact, but not long ago, I heard that he had a fight with the Navy and won. Now I don't know where to be. When Marco said this, he obviously didn't nothing to worry about. In fact, if there were no calculations and conspiracies here, it would really not be anything worth worrying about. The sea is so vast that even the New World Gateway Sea, where people travel back and forth, is still rippled with strange waves. If something really weird happened, such as a strange fog or something, and Tikai accidentally got involved, it would be normal if the phone bug signal inside couldn't be transmitted. It can even be said that this kind of thing happens often on the sea, but most of it is not dangerous. Maybe a few months later, or maybe a few days later, the fog clears and everything returns to normal. Listening to Marco's words, Newgate nodded, but after a while, he felt that it was better to be more careful. After thinking about it, Newgate said, "Is Teach's life card there? Let's take a look." Marco didn't say anything more and quickly walked out of the house to get the life card. After a while, Marco walked in with a piece of paper in his hand. The paper is extremely white, with just a few wrinkles on it. "Dad, there's nothing wrong with the lifeguard," Marco said. Newgate turned around and took a look. There was indeed nothing wrong with it. As for these wrinkles, fatigue, tiredness or minor injuries may appear. It is normal. As long as the lifeguard does not burn. Which proved that there was nothing serious wrong with this person. Therefore, Newgate felt much more relieved and felt that he might have thought too much. In fact, the warring States Marshal was also very careful and had anticipated the situation, so even though Teach was arrested, but he lived a good life. Even though his freedom was imprisoned, he still had enough food and drink every day. Being in jail was like opening a presidential suite. Under normal circumstances, if Teach really thought of a way to spread the word about his dangerous situation, there would be nothing he could do. He could harm himself to warn his father. Dante was tricked by Orgrim into causing trouble, so he should act like this. According to the Navy's arrangements, he would behave accordingly. After collecting his thoughts, Newgate asked, "What happened at sea recently?" Marco thought for a while, then said with a smile, "It's not a big deal. If there is something interesting, it is that not long ago, the Shampoo Islands." "Raleigh?" Newgate was stunned for a moment, then said with a smile, "This is really interesting. That guy Raleigh is actually in the Chambord Islands." "Yes, and Orgrim's son, the little guy named and dressed, has entered the New World. Our people have observed their ship before, but they are very well behaved, so there is no pay attention," Marco said again. Newgate nodded with a smile. Although there was a dispute between him and Orgrim, neither of them took it to heart. There was no need to treat and dress like this. The little guy had some bad thoughts. Just when Newgate opened his mouth to make fun of something, he suddenly froze for a moment, frowned and said, "Did you just say Raleigh?" "Yes," Mal responded somewhat strangely. "What happened?" As the strongest man in the past, Newgate fought for world supremacy with heroes such as Sky and Roger, and also fought with Orgrim for 20 years. He was definitely not a fool. "I didn't react just now, but when I thought about it now, I felt something was wrong." Pluto Hilbas Raleigh appeared in the Shampoo Islands, and after a fierce battle with Admiral Porisalino, the whole incident disappeared? This is extremely unreasonable. That's Hades. Former crew member of One Piece. The Navy discovered his whereabouts but did not respond. This has a different meaning than not looking for him. If you don't put in the effort to look for it, no one will care about it 20 years later, let alone criticize the Navy. After all, there are so many troubles on the sea. If the Navy insists on finding the members of the disbanded pirate group, it is not doing its job. But after discovering it and having a fight, they still pretended not to see it, which is a big problem. This shows that the Navy must have more important things going on than dealing with the remnants of the Pirate King. In fact, this was also the case in the original story. After receiving the news from Raleigh, Garp immediately suppressed the news. Nothing uploaded. What is the reason? They were just afraid that the Navy would have a big conflict with Raleigh at that time. At that time, the battle on the top was about to begin, and Garp did not want to cause trouble. How similar to today's situation. Then, the war was over, and the Navy was considered a great victory. It had the opportunity and time to free up its hands to deal with Raleigh. But a series of problems followed one after another. Teach dominated the four emperors, due to the Pelton riot, the martial war in the Navy, the world recruitment operation, and the Navy headquarters relocation plan. In short, compared with these major events, Raleigh, a bad old man, is obviously not important, so no one will mess with him. And Raleigh was also quite sensible. During that time, he was mostly away from the Chambord Islands. He went to teach Luffy and didn't cause trouble to the Navy. This matter was finally revealed. At this time, Newgate had realized that the Navy might be doing something important, and thought of Teach's disappearance and his bad premonition. Looking at the situation, Newgate has always been very clear that once the Navy decides to take action against the pirates in the New World, the Whitebeard pirates are definitely the first to be caught and stabbed. After all, their territory has just sealed the New World portal sea area. Unless the Navy kills them, it will be difficult to go out into the New World and make any big moves. During this time, Newgate has also been secretly preparing and thinking about how to respond to the upcoming naval offensive. However, he has not yet figured out how the Navy will take action. At this moment, he seems to have caught some traces. Maybe it's a conspiracy. Check, we must find Tikai quickly and find him. He may be in danger, Newgate thought in his heart. Just when he was about to tell Marco to do something, the phone on the table next to him rang. Newgate turned around and frowned slightly. It was the Lord of the Night. Hosgarot Orgrim. This bastard, what are you doing contacting me at this time? Newgate murmured with some doubts in his heart. But then he thought about it, maybe this guy also discovered something was wrong. One person is short-term and everyone is short-term. Newgate also had some doubts in his heart, and thought that it would not be a problem to discuss it with Orgrim. After all, he could see clearly that this matter was not a matter of a single pirate group, but a pirate problem of the entire New World. He doesn't want to be cannon fodder for nothing and be on the front line. Therefore, although he was confused, Newgate still suppressed his restlessness and first answered the phone. Hello? Newgate responded in a low voice. On the other side of the phone, Orgrim asked in a slightly serious tone, old man with white beard, do you feel something is wrong? Newgate's heart trembled, and he said in a deep voice, you also feel that something is wrong. It's more than just a feeling. I caused this problem for you. Orgrim was thinking so in his heart, but he said seriously, of course, what happened in the Shampoo Islands is too weird, isn't it? Orgrim didn't think much about Rayleigh, that was his fault. It was a blind spot in his thinking, but he did judge based on his own experience and perspective that the Navy was deliberately turning big things into trivial matters. This is similar. Togate came to the conclusion that it was almost. Sure enough, you discovered it too. Newgate nodded. The heroes have the same idea. Orgrim is indeed so alert. Not only did I discover this, but there was also more important news. Although it has not been verified yet, I ask you, have you contacted Marshal D. Teach? Orgrim asked in a deep tone. Newgate was shocked. There is no doubt that when Orgrim asked, it had already proven one thing, that is, there is a high probability that something happened to Teach on 3.6. Got it? Unable to contact me, but not long ago, Newgate spoke. That's fake news. Orgrim interrupted without hesitation. Then, before Newgate could speak, Orgrim said in a deep voice, according to the intelligence obtained from our Warhammer pirates, the captain of your 2nd Division is, in all likelihood he was captured alive by the Navy, so I think that old bastard from the Sengoku period is likely to use Teach as bait to force your Whitebeard pirates to go to Marineford to prove a decisive battle with the Navy. This should be a war deployment for the entire pirate camp. As soon as I thought of it, I wanted to confirm it with you first. Don't be too impulsive. Let's take a breath first. Newgate listened to the information given by Orgrim at this time, and his straight white beard trembled, obviously full of anger in his heart. He did not ask or question the source of Orgrim's information, because there was no meaning. At the same time, he already believed it in his heart. After all, he had some doubts about this matter. At the same time, the intelligence capabilities of the Warhammer pirates were already better than the Big Mom Thief group, which was known as the #1 in the industry. It is reasonable for Orgrim to be able to detect any clues. Anyway, Newgate didn't think much about it, let alone thought that all of this was a trap set up by Orgrim behind the scenes. The reason is, drag him into the water with the Whitebeard pirates, be willing to be a pioneer. _Feeler reminds you, 3 things about reading, collect, recommend, and share.